Hi, I'm Camila. I'm 35 years old. I've spent the better part of my life working hard, really hard. I'm the deputy CEO at a sports nutrition company. People always ask me, why aren't you married yet? Like it's a flaw to be alone. But the truth is, I love my life the way it is. I'm not broken. I'm not incomplete. I've built something real. My younger brother Jake is 28. Last year, he married his longtime girlfriend, Sarah. They'd been together for years, so the wedding didn't surprise anyone. I was genuinely happy for them. I even gave them a $15,000 wedding gift, no small amount, even with my salary. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant in her dress, and Jake couldn't stop smiling. But, of course, the peace didn't last. At the reception, my aunts came at me like clockwork. Camila, when are you going to settle down? You're the only one left now. That house of yours is too big for just one person. It needs a family. I smiled. I nodded. I played the part. But inside? I was clenching every muscle just to stay composed. I was tired of pretending that my life wasn't enough because it didn't include a husband or children. A few months after the wedding, Jake and Sarah moved into a small studio that our parents owned. Rent-free. My mom asked me to help with their utilities, and I did without complaint. I wanted to support my brother. I believed in family. Sarah seemed kind enough. She was polite during family dinners, asked about my work, even thanked me now and then for the help. I truly thought we had a good relationship. I've been working since I was 16. I went to college while holding down part-time jobs. I worked my way up for 13 years to become deputy CEO. 2 years ago, I bought my dream house, a 4-bedroom place with a garden and a spacious kitchen. It was everything I'd ever wanted. I gave my parents a spare key when I moved in. They'd helped me unpack and furnish the place. It felt natural, safe, normal. I trusted them. Completely. Every Sunday, we had family dinners. It was tradition. But one Sunday, everything changed. I came home early from a business trip exhausted, craving nothing but sleep in my own bed. But the moment I walked through the front door, I froze. My parents were in the living room. My father was sealing cardboard boxes. My mother was carefully wrapping up the framed pictures from my hallway. They didn't look startled. They looked guilty. Camila, my mother said, too brightly. You're home early, my father muttered. I glanced at the boxes. My clothes. My books. Even the little ceramic mug Jake made for me in 3rd grade, wrapped and ready to go. What is this? I asked. My voice cracked. Well, Mom said with a nervous laugh, Jake and Sarah are expecting. They need space. That little studio just won't work anymore, and your house is perfect for a growing family. You want me to move out of my own house? I asked in disbelief. We already found you a nice studio near the office, Dad said. You're hardly ever home anyway. They laughed. Like it was all some quirky family arrangement. Like I wasn't being robbed. But I smiled. I nodded. And then I called the police. You see, I may be many things, but naive isn't one of them. I bought this house. Every dollar, every brick, every piece of it was mine. And I wasn't going to let anyone steal it. The officers showed up within 20 minutes. I showed them the deed, my ID, proof of ownership. Jake and Sarah arrived halfway through the ordeal, visibly confused, until they realized I wasn't joking. You're being dramatic, Sarah said. It's just a house, Jake added. No, it wasn't just a house. It was my life. That night, I changed the locks. I revoked the spare keys. I blocked their numbers for a while. The betrayal stung deeper than I could explain. My own family, the people I'd supported, the people I'd sacrificed for. Plotted behind my back to give my home to someone else. But I wasn't done. See, the thing about betrayal is that it changes you. It sharpens you. Makes you colder. Smarter. In the months that followed, I pulled away. I stopped paying their bills. I stopped showing up at dinners. I watched from a distance as the cracks began to show. Jake lost his job. Sarah had complications during her pregnancy. My parents were forced to cover their rent and expenses, and they couldn't keep up. Eventually, the studio was sold. Jake and Sarah moved in with my parents, who now relied on their retirement savings to support 3 extra mouths. And me? I lived quietly, peacefully, until one Sunday, months later, I received a letter. Handwritten. From my mother. Camila, we're sorry. We should have never betrayed you. We miss you. Please come home. But I was already home. Since Jake and I were kids, Sundays meant gathering at our parents' house for dinner. The same table where we used to eat cereal before school was now a stage for conversations that were becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Mom still made her pot roast. The house still smelled like rosemary and slow-cooked meat, but lately, there was something sour beneath the warmth. Sarah had started slipping in little comments. Harmless to the untrained ear, but I heard every edge. It must be so nice to stretch your legs in all that space, she'd say casually, carving her chicken. Or, some people live like queens while others squeeze into shoeboxes. She never said my name, but everyone knew. At first, I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe I was being sensitive. Family dynamics are messy. Sometimes people say thoughtless things. But then Jake started chiming in too. He'd talk about how hard it is to think about starting a family in such a cramped space. How a child needs a room to grow. And always, they'd glance at me. I wanted to scream. To stand up and remind them that I didn't inherit my home, didn't marry into it, didn't get it handed down. I worked. I bled for that house. 13 years of overtime, of late nights, of being overlooked, undermined, underestimated. But instead, I just sat there, chewing pot roast and swallowing my rage. And my parents? They nodded along to every complaint. Like Sarah was making perfect sense. Like I was some dragon hoarding treasure I didn't need. They forgot how many times I'd stepped in, paid Jake's bills, covered emergencies, even loaned them money more than once. 3 months after Sarah started her campaign of whispers, I arrived for Sunday dinner and felt it immediately. Something had changed. My parents were stiff, too smiley. Jake kept glancing at Sarah with this puffed-up grin, his hand constantly resting on her stomach like it was made of glass. Sarah looked like she'd swallowed a canary. And I knew. She's pregnant. They were going to announce it. I braced myself. Jake cleared his throat just as the food hit the table. Sarah and I have some news, he said, lacing his fingers through hers. We're having a baby. My mom gasped, already crying before the words even finished. She launched herself at Sarah like she was the Virgin Mary. My father shook Jake's hand like his son had just won an Olympic medal. I smiled, genuinely. I mean it. A baby was a beautiful thing. I was happy for them. Maybe now the comments would stop. Maybe they'd find something else to obsess over besides my empty house. But I underestimated them. Because 3 weeks later, I came home early from a business trip to find my world crashing down. Boxes. Taped shut. Labeled in my mother's handwriting. My framed degrees stacked like clutter. Jake's old pickup truck idling in the driveway, half filled with my things. And there they were, Mom, Dad, Jake, and Sarah inside my home, packing. Camila, Mom said, as if nothing was wrong. We were just helping get things ready. Thought you'd appreciate the head start on moving. Moving? I asked, my voice hollow. Well, Jake said, stepping forward, we figured now's a good time for you to downsize. The baby will be here soon, and this house, it's just sitting here half empty. Sarah had the nerve to smile at me, one hand resting on her stomach. It just makes sense. It took everything in me not to scream. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded. I walked out. I called the police. They'd made a mistake. A fatal one. They thought because I was quiet, I was weak. Because I was single, I was disposable. But I'm none of those things. I'm calculating. I'm precise. And I don't forget betrayal. That night, I changed the locks. Installed security cameras. Canceled the utilities I'd been paying. Froze the joint savings account I shared with my parents for emergencies. I called my lawyer and updated my will. I left everything to a women's education charity in my name. And then I waited. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Jake got laid off. Their rent-free studio? Sold. My parents, who had quietly depended on my financial help, suddenly couldn't float the extra mouths. The bills piled up. One by one, they tried reaching out. First Jake, then Sarah, then my mother. Each message more desperate than the last. You misunderstood. We were just trying to help. Family is all we have. No. Family is supposed to protect you. Not plot behind your back. Not laugh while tearing down everything you built. One day, I received a handwritten letter. From my mom. Camila, we miss you. We're sorry. Please come home. The house feels empty without you. But here's the thing. I never left. They were the ones who tried to replace me. Erase me. And now? I live in peace. In my house. The house that nearly cost me everything. But it also taught me the most important lesson. Blood may be thicker than water, but betrayal cuts deeper than either. Congratulations, I said. And I meant it. That's wonderful news. Jake and Sarah looked at me with big smiles. I tried to hold on to the warmth of the moment, tried to be happy for them, sincerely. But of course, my mother couldn't leave it alone. Well, she said, glancing right at me, at least one of my children is giving me grandchildren. I was starting to think I'd never get any. The words cut deep, but I stayed quiet. This wasn't the time for a fight. I just smiled again and said congratulations. And then Sarah turned to me with that sweet, syrupy smile she always wore before saying something that would gut you. Actually, Camila, she said, I've been talking to Jake and your parents about something important. About our living situation. I stopped chewing. She kept going, her voice filled with fake concern and subtle entitlement. We all agree that our family's housing isn't really distributed fairly. I mean, you live alone in that big house, and we're crammed into a tiny studio. And soon we'll have a baby who needs their own room. I looked around the table. Jake and my parents were nodding like this was perfectly reasonable. What does that have to do with me? I asked slowly, though my stomach was already churning. That's when my mother jumped in as if she'd been rehearsing it. Camila, you need to act like a real sister. You need to prove you love your brother and your future nephew. My hands went cold. And how exactly do I do that? I asked, though I already knew. You give your house to Jake and Sarah, she said simply, as if she were offering me a slice of bread. They need the space more than you. I stared at her. She was serious. Dad chimed in like it was a done deal. You'd move into the studio they live in now. We're even willing to make it official. You sign over your house to Jake, and we'll sign the studio over to you. I laughed. I actually laughed. It wasn't funny. It was horrifying. No, I said, standing up. Absolutely not. Mom's voice turned sharp. Don't be selfish, Camila. Selfish. I repeated. I worked 13 years for that house. Every promotion. Every late night. Every cent. I earned it. And then my father, my own father, looked at me and said, You're just an old maid who'll never get married or have kids anyway. What do you need a house like that for? It hit me like a slap. Jake took his turn. You're being greedy. Family is supposed to help family. I stared at them. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or scream. Greedy? I whispered. I gave you $15,000 for your wedding. I pay your bills every month. How exactly am I greedy? That's different, Jake muttered. No, it's not different. My voice was rising now. I'm tired of pretending I don't see what this is. I'm tired of being the one who gives and gives while you all sit there and act like I'm the problem. I'm tired of you loving Jake more than me. That's not true, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Really? I snapped. Then here's a solution. Sell the studio apartment. Use that money for a down payment and buy Jake and Sarah their own house. My parents looked at each other. We can't afford a second mortgage, Dad said. Then live within your means, I said, grabbing my purse. And don't dream about taking my house just because you're too entitled to use your own money. I turned toward the door. Camila, you're being ridiculous, Mom called out. Selfish, Dad added. Greedy, Jake muttered again. I turned back one last time. I'm done with this conversation. I'm not giving up my house. That's final. And then I left them there frozen, dumbfounded, sitting at the same table where I used to eat breakfast before school. When I walked into my home, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to breathe. The place was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. But that peace didn't last. A week later, I noticed signs. Things moved, drawers open, lights on when I knew I'd turned them off. I checked the security footage. Nothing. Until I saw it, Jake, using the spare key, wandering around like he owned the place. I sat down and smiled. Cold, quiet rage filled me. I called a locksmith the next morning and changed every lock. Then I installed hidden cameras. I filed a cease and desist through my lawyer, citing unlawful entry. I froze all financial assistance. They were cut off. No utilities. No backup plan. No money. I waited. And soon enough, I got what I expected. Jake and Sarah had to leave the studio. My parents couldn't afford it without my help. The family started unraveling. Jake tried to guilt-trip me again. He showed up at my office one afternoon, unannounced. "You're tearing this family apart," he said. "No," I replied calmly. "You did that the day you tried to steal my life." When I walked into my house that evening, I paused in the entryway and looked around. The couch I'd spent months saving for, the kitchen table where I had quiet breakfasts alone, the big windows in my bedroom that welcomed the morning light like an old friend, it all belonged to me. This wasn't just a house. It was proof of everything I'd sacrificed, of every time I'd bitten my tongue instead of snapping back. Every year I'd spent climbing a ladder no one thought I could climb. Let them call me selfish. Let them call me greedy. Let them call me an old maid. This house was mine, and I was done apologizing for it. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in the living room, and watched the breeze move through the backyard trees. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. I'd said no, and the world didn't end. But the next morning, the siege began. It started at 7 a.m. with my mother, then my father, then Jake, then Sarah. Call after call. I silenced my phone and got ready for work like it was any other day. But by lunchtime, I had 12 missed calls and 20 texts. I scrolled through them in the break room, chewing my sandwich without emotion. "Camila, we need to talk. You're being unreasonable. Mom, your brother needs your help. Family comes first. Dad." Sarah cried all night. "You're hurting a pregnant woman." Jake, "I thought you loved me like a sister. I guess I was wrong." Sarah, "I deleted them all. Not a single response. They wanted guilt. They wanted shame. They wanted me to crack. But I wasn't playing their game anymore." The calls kept coming for 3 more days. I stopped checking my voicemails, but one message slipped through my silence and made my blood boil. "Camila, it's Jake. Sarah's health is suffering because of the stress you're causing. If something happens to the baby, it's on you." That was it. They were actually trying to blame me for pregnancy complications because I refused to hand over my home. I showed the message to Lisa at work. She's my closest friend, someone who's seen the cracks in my family from day one. She read the text and looked up at me with disgust. "Are they serious?" "Apparently," I said. "According to them, I'm single-handedly responsible for destroying Sarah's pregnancy because I won't give them my house." "That's insane," Lisa said. "You know that, right?" "I do," I nodded. But it felt good to hear someone else say it. They weren't trying to appeal to reason. They were appealing to my heart, because that's what manipulators do when logic fails. They guilt you. They twist the narrative until you look like the villain in your own life. But I wasn't falling for it. And they weren't done. By the end of the week, the texts turned creative. Mom sent me a Bible verse about loving your neighbor as yourself. Dad forwarded a story about a woman who gave up her house to help her sister. "This could be you," he wrote beneath the link. "You could be the hero of this story." I laughed out loud. A sharp, bitter laugh that startled even me. A hero? No. What they wanted wasn't heroic. It was delusional. The worst were the ones from Sarah. She started sending me ultrasound pictures with captions like, "Your nephew needs a room. Don't you want him to have a yard to play in? This house should be a place for family, not just one person." Every word dripped with manufactured innocence and underlying pressure. They thought they could push me over the edge, like they had before. But I was building something else now. Not just boundaries, but armor. They thought I would break. What they didn't realize is that I was preparing to strike back. "Your nephew needs a room. Don't you want your family to live?" That was Sarah's latest text, right under an ultrasound photo she didn't ask if I wanted to see. I wanted to text back and remind her she'd been living rent-free since the wedding, but I didn't. Engaging would only keep their campaign alive. By the end of the week, the storm of messages started to die down. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally accepted my answer. I should have known better. That Friday, I wasn't feeling well. By noon, I had a pounding headache and chills crawling up my back. I told my boss I needed to leave early, and by 2 p.m., I was driving home, exhausted, feverish, just wanting to crawl into bed. But when I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. There was a moving truck parked in front of my house. Murphy's Moving Service, written in big block letters across the side. My parents' car was in the driveway too, parked like it belonged there. I parked, heart racing. And I sprinted up to my front door. Unlocked. My key still worked, at least. I stepped inside, into a nightmare. My living room looked like a robbery in progress. Boxes everywhere. My dishes were being wrapped in newspaper. My books packed tightly into crates. And there, like ghosts, stood my parents, acting like they had every right to be there. What the hell is going on? I shouted. They both jumped like kids caught sneaking candy. Oh, Camila, Mom said lightly, brushing her hands on her jeans. We thought you were still at work. I asked you a question. I stepped forward, rage and nausea mixing. What are you doing in my house? We're helping you move, she said, like this was a completely normal Friday afternoon activity. Jake and Sarah are moving in, she added, and you'll be going to the studio apartment. I stared at her. At the boxes. At my life being folded and boxed without my permission. I told you I wasn't doing that, I said, my voice starting to shake. But not from fear. From fury. Dad didn't even glance up. We all decided you don't need this much space, he said, carefully packing up my books. It's not fair. Jake has a baby on the way. I don't care what you decided, I said, louder now. This is my house. They just kept packing like I wasn't even standing there. Mom folded one of my sweaters and added it to a box. Dad gently wrapped a framed photo of me holding my college diploma. I felt something in me snap. Stop. Stop packing my things. Right. Now. Camila, don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mom said with a sigh. That was it. I lost it. I ran upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and called 911. I need to report a break-in, I told the dispatcher. My parents broke into my house. They're packing up my belongings. They won't leave. Are you in immediate danger? She asked. No, but they're stealing my stuff and they're trespassing. We'll send someone right away. 5 minutes later, the police arrived. 2 officers stood at my door while I explained everything. My parents tried to downplay it like it was a misunderstanding. Officer, Dad said, calm and smug, this is our daughter. We're just helping her move. It's a family matter. The officer turned to me. Ma'am, did you give them permission to be here? Absolutely not, I said. They've been pressuring me for weeks. I told them multiple times I'm not moving. The officers looked at each other. Then one turned back to my parents. Sir, ma'am, you need to come with us. This is ridiculous. Mom screamed. She's our daughter. That doesn't give you the right to enter her home without permission, the second officer said. That's when it got worse. My mom started shrieking, and my dad swung his arm toward the officer's chest in protest. Big mistake. They were both arrested. Right there. In my living room. In front of the confused, wide-eyed moving crew standing in the doorway holding my boxed-up life. What about our stuff? One of the movers asked awkwardly. Put it all back, I said. Every last piece. Put it exactly where you found it. That night, I stood in the middle of my half-packed house and stared at the wreckage. It wasn't just furniture or decor. They tried to dismantle me. My boundaries. My independence. My identity. But they failed. And I was done playing defense. Now, it was my turn. Put everything back where you found it, I said to the movers. And send the bill to whoever hired you. After they left, I sat in my kitchen in silence. My hands trembled against the mug of tea I didn't drink. My own parents. My flesh and blood. They had broken into my house and tried to erase me from it like I was some mistake they could correct. They didn't just cross a line, they obliterated it. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was the police station. It was Mom. "Camila," she said, her voice lined with indignation and just a hint of forced softness. "You need to drop these charges. We're your parents. We were just trying to help." "No," I said flatly. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." And I hung up. The next morning, I walked into the police station. Calm, focused, tired, but resolute. "I'm not dropping the charges," I told the officer. They looked surprised, but I wasn't. I was just done. Let my parents deal with the consequences for once. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their backup plan or their unpaid ATM. They made bail later that evening. No surprise, money still talks, and they had no criminal history. What did surprise me? They didn't call. Not to yell. Not to plead. Not even to manipulate. Instead, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in months, my grandmother. She sounded old. Tired in a way I hadn't remembered. "Come see me," she said. "Your parents, they're very upset. They can't believe you had them arrested. They broke into my house, Grandma. They were packing up my belongings. Without permission." I know," she whispered. "And I told them you were right. I did. But calling the police on your own parents. What was I supposed to do? Ask them nicely to stop stealing my life." She didn't answer right away. "This whole situation, it's a mess. But you can't let this destroy your family." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "They did this to themselves." "Maybe you're right," she sighed. "But they're still your parents." "Are they?" I asked. "Because parents are supposed to love their children. Support them. Not try to steal from them. Not break into their homes and call them greedy for protecting what they earned." We hung up shortly after. And then, nothing. 3 days of silence. And for the first time in years, it was bliss. No angry calls. No guilt trips. No sacrifices waved in my face. Just me and my quiet, beautiful home. Then, on the 4th day, a letter came in the mail. It was from my mother. Fancy stationery. Careful handwriting. "Camila, after much thought and discussion with your father and brother, we have decided to disown you. You are no longer our daughter. Your selfish actions have shown us that you care nothing for your family. You chose a house over your own flesh and blood. We will not be contacting you again, and we ask that you do not contact us. Former mother." I read it twice. Then placed it neatly on the kitchen table. I waited to feel something: grief, anger, regret. But all I felt was relief. They thought this letter would devastate me. That I'd be shattered. Begging. That I'd come crawling back, crying about family and forgiveness. But all I felt was freedom. No more expectations I never agreed to. No more emotional blackmail dressed as family loyalty. No more pretending to be smaller so Jake could feel like the golden child. I brewed myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat in my living room, and looked around at everything I almost lost. This house. My sanctuary. My independence. My identity. I'd fought tooth and nail for it, and now I was done fighting for anyone who didn't fight for me. The next few weeks were the most peaceful I'd had in years. I went to work. I came home. I cooked what I liked. I played music without judgment. I drank wine on my porch. I read books in silence. I healed. No Sunday dinners. No snide comments. No backhanded questions about my relationship status. Just me. And I liked it. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that Jake and Sarah were still living in that tiny studio apartment. Apparently, Sarah was furious about it. Word was, she thought she was owed the house, that being pregnant meant she deserved to be handed everything on a silver platter. But no one was handing her anything anymore. Their financial struggles got worse. Sarah had to quit her job for bed rest. Jake was denied a promotion at work. And my parents? They started quietly reaching out to extended family, asking for money. I watched it all unfold from a distance. No reaction. No smugness. Just clarity. This was the life they built, the consequences they earned. And me? I was just getting started. Grandma mentioned it during one of our occasional phone calls. "They're managing," she said gently. "The baby's due in a few months, and they're getting by." "What about my parents?" I asked. They're thinking about selling their house and the studio apartment, she replied. They want to use the money to buy 2 places, one for themselves and one for Jake and Sarah. I let the words hang in the silence between us. They could have done that from the beginning, I said quietly. Instead of trying to steal mine. Grandma sighed. A soft, worn-out sound. I think they just wanted to take advantage of you, Mija. They didn't think you'd fight back. Well, I said, they were wrong. So wrong. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, it was knowing it wasn't spontaneous. It had been planned. I later found out that my parents and Jake had been scheming for months, slowly building the narrative that I didn't deserve what I had. Because I was single. Because I didn't have children. Because I was quiet and giving, and they mistook that for weakness. They convinced themselves I'd just hand over everything I'd worked for to keep the family together. That I'd be so desperate for their approval, for belonging, that I'd sacrifice myself just to feel included. They were wrong on both counts. The most ironic part? If they'd just asked, if they'd come to me like reasonable, respectful human beings, if they had said, Camila, we're struggling. Would you help us? I might have said yes. I've always been generous. I helped with Jake's wedding. Paid their bills. Never once held it over them. But they didn't want help. They wanted control. They wanted to take what they believed I didn't deserve and punish me for succeeding without them. 6 months later, word spread that they finally went through with their new plan. They sold both properties, the family house and the studio, and used the money to buy 2 smaller places. Jake and Sarah moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment. My parents bought a little condo near the freeway. No front yard. No garden. No legacy. Everyone seemed satisfied. And me? I was still in my house. The one I sacrificed for. The one I earned. I still had my job, my peace, and my freedom. I still woke up every morning in a home filled with silence instead of shame. Sometimes. I miss the idea of family. The soft image of Sunday dinners. Laughter at the table. Shared stories during the holidays. But those memories? They were fantasies stitched together from what I wished we were, not what we ever truly were. What I don't miss. The constant criticism. The manipulation. The endless feeling that no matter what I did, it was never enough not for them. My life is quiet now, yes. But it's mine. I make my own decisions. I spend my own money. I breathe without judgment. I don't have to apologize for being successful. I don't have to explain why I'm single. I don't have to prove that I deserve the space I occupy. No one tells me I owe them my life. No one demands I hand over my future in exchange for conditional love. And I've learned something I wish I'd known earlier. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the very ones holding you back. Sometimes, cutting ties with toxic family isn't cruel. Sometimes, it's the kindest thing you can do for yourself. My family thought they were teaching me a lesson by disowning me. They thought I'd crumble. They thought I'd come crawling back, offering my house like a peace offering soaked in shame. But all they did was teach me just how strong I really am. They taught me that I never needed their approval to be whole. They taught me that silence is sometimes more powerful than forgiveness. They taught me that choosing myself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's freedom. It's healing. And now I'm not just surviving. I'm thriving.